The story of American history begins with prehistory, before humans had developed a system of writing to record their actions and transactions. It begins with fragments, bits of broken pottery, pieces of stone tools, splinters of bone. From such fragments, archaeologists have pieced together an answer to the question, who were the first Americans? Or rather, several answers. As scientists discover new evidence, they revise the picture of the distant American past. In the 1970s, archaeologists working with crews building an oil pipeline across Alaska believed they found remains of the first Americans. Ancient skulls recently unearthed on the west coast of Mexico may be from Southeast Asians who reached North America by sailing across the Pacific Ocean. Molecular biologists, using techniques of DNA analysis, have found genetic links between modern Native Americans and European populations thousands of years older than Columbus. Where the first Americans came from, as well as when and how they came, are still unresolved questions. Whoever arrived first, one important historical truth remains. The New World reported by European explorers some 500 years ago was anything but new. It had been for thousands of years home to millions of inhabitants. While new evidence prompts archaeologists, biologists, and geneticists to debate the origins of the first Americans, most still agree on the broad outlines of a picture of this far-off time. It looks something like this. More than 12,000 years ago, nomadic hunters braved the bitterly cold temperatures of the last ice age. At that time, several huge North American glaciers covered the continent as far south as modern-day Chicago and New York. Beneath these glaciers, river systems were frozen. This caused sea levels around the world to drop by more than 300 feet, 100 mapas, exposing miles of additional shoreline. Siberia, in Northeast Asia, and Alaska, 50 miles, 80 kilometers apart by boat today, were then one continuous landmass that modern geologists have named Beringia, Buringia. This temporary land bridge between the continents of Asia and North America was a 1,000-mile, 1,600 kilometers swath of tundra with patchy vegetation fed by glacial runoff. Over many generations, small bands of hunters and gatherers moved east, migrating seasonally to find food and eventually advancing into the area that is now North America. Archaeologists call these earliest people in the Americas Paleo-Americans. The first part of that label, paleo, comes from a Greek term meaning old or ancient. In the Arctic regions, the tundra is a vast treeless plain with low-lying summer vegetation. The prehistoric Paleo-American peoples pursued the giant animals of the era, including the mastodon, woolly mammoth, and saber-toothed cat, as well as the ancestors of modern caribou and bison. One kill could feed an entire nomadic community for weeks. The animal's fur provided warm clothing. The hunters carved the ivory and bone into tools. They lashed driftwood and tusks together as ridge poles for tents made from hide. Women and children remained in camp and foraged nearby for wild plants, birds, eggs, berries, and roots. Over time, steady migrations of hunters, along with a slowly warming climate, led to the extinction of large, hairy mammals and the depletion of food supplies. To survive, the nomadic bands were forced to develop more efficient hunting techniques. For example, some used a lever called an atlatl to throw a spear farther and harder. But such innovations could not fend off the threat of starvation, so entire communities picked up and moved to unknown valleys and plains. These nomadic people migrated across North America. They moved south and east into more hospitable latitudes. As the glaciers receded northward and then melted away, the channels they scoured became river bottoms and lake beds. In the rich topsoil left behind, tall grasslands and dense forests thrived. Elk, deer, and bison, as well as countless small animal species, flourished in these environments. So did the hunters who followed them. Within 1,000 years, perhaps even less, according to some modern scientists, these nomadic hunters spread across the continents of North and South America. They had unknowingly become, in their meandering quest for more food and better conditions, the first Americans. Nomadic bands eventually settled in every geographic region of the Americas, which stretches more than 10,000 miles, 16,000 kilometers north to south, forming one continuous landmass from the Arctic to the Antarctic. Some tribes became skilled at stalking deer in forests. Others learned how to slaughter the bison herds crisscrossing the plains. In hot, arid regions, when summer came, hunters foraged in higher elevations for food. In winter, they camped in the warmer lowlands. From sites littered with animal bones, archaeologists have excavated some Paleo-American tools, including a variety of long spear points. These spear points, characterized by differing details in their length and shape, are classified into several major groups. 3 of these are Clovis, Folsom, and Plano, or Plainview, named after the places where each was originally found, near Clovis and Folsom in present-day New Mexico, and near Plainview, Texas. The names also apply to the different Paleo-American culture groups. Tools differed among the major Paleo-American groups, allowing archaeologists to determine that the Clovis people made this spear point. Early civilizations in Central and South America. A narrow isthmus connects the continents of North and South America, In North America, the region called Mesoamerica stretches from central Mexico south to northern Central America. With its balmy winters and warm summers, this area was an inviting home for Paleo-Americans. Fish were plentiful on both coasts, the Pacific to the west, and the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean Sea to the east. A broad range of plants and animals thrived in the tropical forests of the coastal lowlands and in the temperate highlands. For these reasons, a mild climate and an abundant food supply, people streamed into Mesoamerica, and it rapidly became the most densely settled American region. An isthmus is a narrow strip of land connecting two larger land areas otherwise separated by water. As the population increased, the ability of the region's resources to sustain so many people, its carrying capacity was strained. Such a narrow landmass, less than 150 miles, 240 kilometers wide in some places, could not support large populations if they continued to feed themselves exclusively by hunting and foraging. So according to scientific estimates, about 7,000 years ago, Mesoamericans discovered how to plant a species of corn, also called maize, and control its seasonal growth. Corn could be cultivated wherever good soil, sunshine, and water were available. Instead of gathering corn as it grew wild on hillsides and in valleys, families now began to plant its kernels closer to their homes. They were becoming farmers. They soon domesticated other wild plants, including beans and squash, which also became staple foods. While hunting and gathering continued on a smaller scale, this agricultural revolution assured families of reliable sources of food and made it possible for them to live in one community for many generations. Horticulture, the cultivation of plants, transformed Mesoamerican society. Farmers usually harvested enough to feed their families, but always tried to produce a surplus for the market. Crops became a medium of exchange as people began to take the food they had grown and trade it for other foodstuffs and for the handiwork of potters, weavers, and basket makers. A bundle of corn, beans, and squash might be offered as tribute to a local chieftain. Trade knitted communities together, as people in different villages exchanged goods and services. Regional markets began to emerge. Some of these grew into small cities, the first urban civilizations in the Americas. The Olmec, the earliest Mesoamerican civilization, the Olmec, reached its peak between 1200 and 400 BC in the area that is now Mexico's Gulf Coast. The Olmec left behind huge earthen mounds and other ruins that appear to be religious sites. Archaeologists have also unearthed colossal stone heads weighing up to 80,000 pounds, 36 tons. The Olmec, the earliest Mesoamerican civilization, left behind gigantic stone heads weighing many tons each. The Olmec invented a kind of calendar and an early form of writing using symbols, or glyphs. They worshipped spirits in nature and carved jade sculptures of jaguars and serpents, representing two of their deities. Their cultural influence extended as far south as modern El Salvador and north of the Rio Grande into the present-day United States. At more than 90 feet, 27 meters high, the four-sided stepped pyramid of Kukulkan dominates the site of the ancient Mayan city of Chichen Itza, Yucatan, Mexico. The Maya succeeded the Olmec and controlled their territory as well as the lands that are now Guatemala and Honduras. They were never unified, but they had great ceremonial centers like the city of Tikal. The Maya developed a particular interest in art and science. They decorated their buildings and public places with ornate stone sculpture. The Maya were excellent astronomers and produced a remarkably accurate calendar based on solar and lunar calculations. Using paper from the bark of wild fig trees, their scholars wrote elaborate manuscripts with pictures and symbols for letters. Some of these documents and inscriptions on buildings and pottery have survived to modern times, giving us the only written records of native Mesoamerican civilization. The Aztec in central Mexico, a people called the Toltec, expanded their empire from AD 900 1100. Then powerful Aztec warriors from the north invaded and took over their territories. The warlike Aztecs went on to build one of the most advanced civilizations in the world at the time. They conquered neighboring city-states and absorbed them into their vast empire, which at its peak had at least 6 million people. They forced captives taken in war to work as slaves. Some worked as farmers, growing crops in fields irrigated with water that flowed down from the mountains surrounding the Valley of Mexico. Aztec engineers drained the swamps around Lake Texcoco to allow for the construction of the capital city, Tenochtitlan, now Mexico City. This incredible city was larger than all but a few European cities of that period. Canals, causeways, and towering pyramids dominated the cityscape. At the heart of Aztec culture was the brutal practice of human sacrifice on a massive scale. Many of the captives taken during frequent wars were sacrificed on the altars of high priests. The 400 to 500 smaller states within the Aztec Empire cowered in fear of their conquerors' military strength and their insatiable bloodthirsty gods. The Aztec Empire was still expanding when Cortés and his Spanish forces arrived in 1519. Within 2 years, the Aztec emperor was dead and the empire had fallen. Aztec engineers created their capital, Tenochtitlan, by draining the swamps around Lake Texcoco in central Mexico. In size, this hub of Aztec activity rivaled European cities of the time. Today it is Mexico City. Around the same time in the early 1500s, the Inca rose to power in the Andes Mountains. At its height, Inca civilization stretched over much of western South America. To connect the capital city of Cuzco with its vast territories, the Inca built an impressive system of roads. A network of side roads led to two main highways, one along the coast more than 2,000 miles, 3,200 kilometers long, and one through the mountains more than 3,000 miles, 4,800 kilometers long. To build these roads, Inca engineers had to dig tunnels through rock and suspend bridges made of vines and logs across deep ravines. On these roads, messengers on relay teams could cover more than 150 miles, 240 kilometers in a day, to deliver orders from the emperor. When needed, armies could march quickly from one region to another. Sadly for the Inca, the Spanish invaders also used these roads, and they destroyed the Inca Empire in the 16th century. North America has many ecosystems, including grasslands, alpine meadows, deserts, swamps, and forests. The Paleo-Americans who migrated here, a land much larger than Mesoamerica, could hunt and gather endlessly without running out of food. Most could satisfy their needs without farming. However, in some areas, early peoples did begin to farm. They built cities in several regions, though not as large or grand as those in Mesoamerica. How do we know how many people lived in prehistoric North America? We don't. Scientists can only estimate. Their current guesses range from 2 million to 18 million for the area of modern Canada and the United States. Regardless of the exact number, when Europeans arrived, they brought deadly diseases that infected entire tribes. Trade spread these diseases to tribes that had not yet encountered Europeans, causing devastating pandemics, widespread outbreaks of illness. As native populations declined, often entire villages, tribes, and cultures disappeared before Europeans could observe or record their ways of life. With so little evidence, it's very difficult to determine early population sizes. The Anasazi, or ancestral Pueblo, one of the least likely places to settle, was the arid Southwest. But more than 3,000 years ago, the Anasazi moved into the area known as Four Corners, where Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah meet today. The Anasazi are also called the ancestral Pueblo, or ancient Pueblo people, because they were the ancestors of modern-day Pueblo nations, including the Hopi and the Zuni. The name Anasazi, which means ancient enemy, was coined by the Navajo, who migrated into the Southwest and fought the ancestral Pueblo people. The Anasazi name has stuck through long-term use. Initially hunters, the Anasazi later learned to cultivate corn, maize, that had originally been domesticated in nearby Mesoamerica. About AD 750, they began building above-ground structures, and later they constructed cliff dwellings. These soaring adobe buildings, later called pueblos by Spanish explorers, from the Spanish word for town, or village, resembled modern-day apartment buildings with hundreds of rooms. They were often organized around a central plaza high on a mesa or perched precariously on the side of a cliff for protection against invaders. Pueblo Bonito, near the north rim of Chaco Canyon in the Anasazi homeland, reveals the Anasazi's architectural sophistication. Here, dwellings rose 4 or 5 stories on all sides of a communal area. Residences were interspersed with kivas, ceremonial lodges for religious rituals. A perimeter of smaller adobe structures, probably used for storage, flanked the compact living area. Perhaps as many as 200 people lived in the pueblo at its peak. Adobe is a building material made of dried bricks of mud. The Anasazi, along with 2 other neighboring groups, were among the first Americans to irrigate their fields. They built low walls to divert water from the steady winter rains and sudden summer thundershowers. Besides providing drinking water, these channels flowed directly to their corn and vegetable plots. The Mogollon people, desert peoples to the south, also altered the course of existing stream beds. The Hohokam, near the Gila River in southern Arizona, used man-made canals to flood their fields. Archaeologists estimate that their remarkably engineered Anasazi irrigation systems at Chaco Canyon permitted several thousand people to live within its walls at one time. Many more people lived in smaller, outlying communities, all connected by miles of roadways. Along these routes, archaeologists have excavated shards of black-on-white pottery, basket fibers, and turquoise chips. People who had to capture every single drop of water to survive were obviously vulnerable to drought, and drought is apparently what led to the downfall of the Anasazi. By examining tree rings and wood used as beams in Anasazi pueblos, scientists have determined that very little rain fell during the middle years of the 12th century. During this period, the pueblo dwellers somehow managed to survive. But a second, more severe drought struck between 1270 and 1300. This time, reservoirs and irrigation ditches went bone dry and stayed that way. Crops withered in the fields. The Anasazi abandoned the canyon. Survivors blended into other tribes, which would soon be named the Pueblo by the Spanish. How archaeologists name ancient peoples archaeologists when excavating cultures that left no written records and had no contact with Europeans do not know what these early people called themselves. In many cases, the people are named after the site where important artifacts and remains were discovered. For example, archaeologists borrowed the name of an Ohio governor's home, Adena, and gave it to the culture they unearthed there. Other archaeologists, digging up Native American remains on the Hopewell family's farm in Ohio, gave the ancient people the name Hopewell. Mississippian mound builders. For centuries, hunters and traders shuttled back and forth along the busy Mississippi River. Two major tributaries, the Ohio in the east and the Missouri in the west, extended this river network. Many permanent communities, taking advantage of the rich topsoil washed ashore, grew corn along the banks of these rivers. In some of these villages, inhabitants constructed protective earthworks as well as ceremonial mounds. Sometime after 700 BC, the Adena, mainly made up of farmers in southwestern Ohio, began to build mounds to bury tribal leaders. By 100 BC, the Adena way of life had yielded to a more advanced civilization called the Hopewell. The more sophisticated Hopewell built elaborate mounds. Thousands of their mounds have been discovered, often with geometric or animal shapes, throughout the Midwest and as far east as modern-day North Carolina and New York State. Their grave goods, what archaeologists have dug up from their burials, include sharks, teeth from Florida, pure silver ore from Ontario, and obsidian from Wyoming volcanoes. These faraway items came from traders and travelers navigating the Mississippi River network, or even sailing to and from Mesoamerica by hugging the coastline of the Gulf of Mexico. Beginning around 8700, another civilization, even more advanced than the Hopewell, grew from the remains of many of their old communities. These people, called Mississippian because of their proximity to the river network, built a large city at Cahokia, Illinois. At Cahokia, archaeologists have discovered hoe-shaped blades made of flint, a very hard stone. When lashed to wooden handles with rawhide, these flint hoes easily cut through rich river topsoil. By AD 1100, after 400 years of growth, Cahokia had become a city of perhaps 20,000 people, about the same size as London at the time. The city, protected by a stockade, was surrounded by hundreds of acres of corn. Scores of farmers tended the city's main food source, while others hunted, gathered, and traded for goods with other settlements. But not everyone in such a large community worked the fields or paddled up and down the river. There is enough archaeological evidence, including the remains of enormous temples, elegant homes, and luxurious jewelry, to imagine a society with noblemen, politicians, and priests. The rulers of Cahokia lived around the city's central plaza in houses erected on top of earthen pyramids. The largest pyramid of all, Monk's Mound, towered over the city and could be seen up and down the river for miles. Its 15-acre, 6-hectare base is larger than the foundation of the Egyptian Pyramid of Giza, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It is over 100 feet, 30 meters high today, but because of erosion, its original height, along with the exact dimensions of every other North American earthen mound, is lost to history. Many complex mounds took geometric or animal shapes, like this one at Serpent Mound, Adams County, Ohio. North American peoples, 1,500 living in vastly different geographic zones, every North American population faced the challenge of adapting to its environment. Mississippian peoples, using canoes, dugouts, and rafts, quickly learned how to navigate the nearby river system as if it were a modern superhighway. In the less inviting ancestral Pueblo environment, successful adaptations weren't so easy until they figured out how to dig canals and store rainwater in reservoirs. The ancestral Puebloans could only hunt and gather in small bands. When they began to use irrigation, however, their crops and cities thrived. As hundreds of different cultural groups spread across the continent, they adjusted to the specific conditions of the places in which they settled. Scientists have discovered that within broadly similar environments, people adapted in similar ways. To organize the study of early Native American life, historians have grouped similar cultures into geographic regions. Here we introduce some of the major regions and cultures. Pacific Coast coastal mountain ranges, including the Cascades and the Sierra Nevada, extend along the west coast of North America from Mexico to Alaska. Before passing over these peaks, storm clouds blowing in off the Pacific Ocean dump most Chapter 1, the first Americans of their moisture. The tallest forests in North America grow here. Seals and sea otters sun along the rocky coast. Small and large game animals feed on the abundant vegetation. In this rich environment, the people didn't need to farm. They met their needs by fishing, hunting, and gathering. In Southern California, mild year-round weather meant that native peoples needed very little clothing and shelter for protection. Cultural groups often numbered fewer than several hundred members and lived within a restricted geographic range. Because of this isolation, the various peoples in this area spoke dozens of different languages and dialects. The Pomo and the Chumash, two typically small cultural groups, hunted rabbits and quail and foraged for nuts, seeds, and grasses. They ground acorns into flour for baking. In the region made up of modern-day Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and southern Alaska, the climate was less temperate. Summers were long and mild, but unlike the southern coast, a short winter ushered in one of the wettest seasons anywhere on Earth. A spectacular rainforest with towering evergreen canopies developed in this area. Along the northern Pacific coastline, channels between barrier islands and the mainland, buffered storms howling in off the Pacific. Receding glaciers left behind deep river channels called fjords, F-A-U-R-D-S, opening into the ocean. Salmon teemed in these waters while whales swam nearby in the warm ocean currents. Moose and deer roamed in dense forests tall enough to provide house planks 5 feet, 15 meters wide, and logs for 30-foot 9 meters dugout canoes. In this rich, complex environment, economic activities required many hands, especially when millions of mature salmon spawned upriver from the Pacific Ocean each August and September. An entire village, men, women, and children, worked feverishly to build stone traps and spear the salmon caught in them. They built bonfires to smoke and preserve the catch. Similarly, it took many men in many boats to harpoon a whale and tow the kill to shore. For weeks, the community worked to carve the flesh and bone. Everyone ate fresh whale meat, especially the blubber, around the hearth. Whale oil lit dark, cavernous log homes during the long winter months. Women worked bones into tools, including knives, scrapers, and needles. Native artists prized whales' teeth and made ornate etchings and carvings from the ivory. For these group efforts, the northern Pacific Coast peoples enjoyed considerable rewards. There was such a surplus of food and other material goods, including baskets and elaborately painted carvings, that families and clans held village-wide celebrations called potlatches to share the bounty freely among friends. Among one Pacific Coast group, the Nootka, clans competed to see which could be the most generous. In this culture, people associated social status and prestige with giving away wealth rather than accumulating it. Intermountain, Columbia Plateau, Great Basin, and Southwest. Between the Pacific Coast Ranges to the west and the Rocky Mountains to the east lies a broad belt of land known as the Intermountain region, literally between the mountains. 2 plateaus, the Columbia in the north and the Colorado in the south, surround a lower central region. This depression, called the Great Basin, is surrounded by higher elevations and mountains on all sides. Mountains on the east and west sides block most precipitation year-round, although winter snowfalls are not uncommon at higher elevations. On the northern plateau, the Columbia River provided ample water and fish for the hunters and gatherers who lived there. Most groups split into small bands to hunt and gather seasonally, coming together in riverbank villages for the annual salmon harvest. Deer, caribou, elk, and small game lived in the scattered forests, where wild berries and fruit were abundant. The Modoc and the Nez Perce roamed this land, making camp near seasonal food sources. Although they lived in winter pit houses dug into the ground, these groups were highly mobile, using tent-like teepees that could be put up and torn down in less than an hour during the warmer seasons. To the south, the Great Basin cultures enjoyed none of the advantages of their northern neighbors. They lived in a harsh environment with few natural resources, little rainfall, no significant rivers, and extremes of temperature, all of which combined to limit population growth. In the lands that are now Nevada and Utah, the Utes and the Shoshone, living in small extended families, traveled from highland to lowland camps with the changing seasons. They hunted upland antelope and collected pine nuts in the fall. In the summer, women and children gathered swarming grasshoppers for food. The entire community cooperated to hunt the most prized prey, the jackrabbit, by driving the creatures into camouflaged nets. The jackrabbit's meat provided food, and its skin provided warm fur for winter clothing. In the southwest, the first Americans built pueblos from dried mud brick for protection from the desert sun. Although the region is arid, irrigation, begun by the ancestral Pueblo and continued by later peoples, allowed large communities to grow. The Hopi Pueblo people, thought to be direct descendants of the ancestral Pueblo, lived in the high, flat mesas where the Colorado Plateau descends from the Rockies into the desert. Sometime between AD 1100 to 1500, Apache and Navajo invaders from Canada drove them from fertile river valleys and onto higher ground for protection. The Navajo, who traditionally call themselves Diné, which means the people, settled throughout the Southwest. They farmed, herded sheep, introduced to North America by the Spanish, and wove brilliantly colored blankets from their wool. In time, they also became the region's foremost artisans of silver and turquoise. In the present-day United States, the Navajo make up one of the most populous groups of Native Americans and live primarily in New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. The Navajo raised sheep and used the wool to weave colorful blankets, a tradition they are still known for today. This wearing blanket dates from 1860. The Great Plains of North America extend from the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains to the geographic center of North America. Beginning as a mile-high, 1,600 Melmswanas Plateau in the west near present-day Denver, the plains are barely 500 feet, 150 meters above sea level by the time they reach the Mississippi River. Tall grasslands, or prairie, once dominated the entire region. The deeply etched river valleys of the Missouri-Mississippi system offered favorable sites to settle, with plenty of water and vegetation. A teepee is a portable conical hut covered with hide. Bison, represented by this carved image, provided food, clothing, and tools to the plains peoples. The Crow, a plains people, were hunters and gatherers who traveled on foot in bands of a few dozen to a few hundred strong. They used dogs to pull lightweight sleds laden with teepee poles and hide mats. As winter approached, the plains people carved thick blocks of sod out of the prairie before it froze. They packed these bricks into foundations, dug out of hillsides or pits carved out of natural depressions. These subterranean lodges, at or below ground level, and reinforced with walls of sod several feet thick, protected them from winter's howling winds and snowdrifts. When forced to go outdoors in sub-zero weather and gale-force winds, group members donned buffalo robes to keep from freezing. In the spring, when river bottom land was easily tilled, villages grew corn, beans, squash, and prairie sunflowers, high in protein and vegetable oil. Women did most of the farming, while men hunted large game, including deer, elk, and their prized quarry, the American buffalo or bison. Before the Spanish brought horses to the plains, villages and groups cooperated to drive entire herds of bison, traveling at speeds up to 60 miles per hour, headlong over cliffs to their destruction. The plains peoples used every part of a slain bison and wasted precious little. The meat was lean and rich in protein, and the fur protected people from the elements. Women fashioned the bison's muscle fiber or sinew into thread for sewing. They made sewing needles from its bones. Men stretched bison hide over bowl-shaped frames to fashion bull boats, almost unsinkable even when floating low with cargo. The bravest and most successful hunters became leaders responsible for the group's food, shelter, and safety. These leaders, often called chieftains or headmen, mapped out the warriors' bison hunts and oversaw the women's preservation of enough meat, as well as vegetables and fruit, for a winter that began in November and ended in April. Leaders also had to negotiate food for the elderly and anyone else incapable of contributing to the welfare of the group. The communities broke into smaller mobile hunting groups in the summer. In late fall, the leaders had to reorganize the larger community to manage the construction of their weatherproof winter lodges. The boundaries of the southeastern region are not easy to define. Many groups moved along the Atlantic coast as well as up and down the Mississippi River system. Some traded with Mesoamerican civilizations by sailing the Gulf of Mexico. Other small communities lived on the tropical islands of the Caribbean Sea. Wherever they lived, southeastern people enjoyed the warm weather that sustained carpets of vegetation. Plant life was richer and more varied than anywhere else in North America. Animals flocked to the region for its constant food supply, and people followed. The Southeast, because of its environmental advantages, attracted some of the highest population densities in North America. Some groups migrated down from the colder north and from the west. Other groups also relocated from the south, from as far away as Mesoamerica. The Taíno, T-A-Y-No, the first peoples encountered by Columbus on the Caribbean island of Hispaniola, even had linguistic relatives as far away as the Amazon River basin in South America. Many villages and towns dotted the region, some with several thousand inhabitants. The Creek, a southeastern people, built homes with open sides to capture summer breezes. They made thatched roofs of reeds or palm fronds to keep dry during heavy downpours. In swampy areas, they built shelters elevated on stilts and platforms. Farmers thinned densely wooded areas by burning or girdling, peeling off a band of bark to starve a tree. They then planted corn and vegetables, including beans and squash, in these cleared fields. Game animals such as deer, elk, black bear, and even forest-dwelling bison roamed in the remaining woods. Alligators and turtles sunned on riverbanks and swam in the swamps. While some men and women farmed, others dug clams and oysters from sandy beaches. Men trolled the riverbanks and coastline, netting and spearing fish. They also concocted a mild poison from local plants to stun fish and scoop them out of ponds. Southeastern peoples, with so many farming, hunting, and gathering opportunities, feasted on the richest diet in North America. With warm weather, abundant natural resources, and many rivers leading to the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico, southeastern Native Americans turned to trade. Their potters shaped reddish wares from iron-rich clay. Other artisans strung oyster shells, especially purple ones, into ornate belts with symbols and animal designs. Coastal peoples evaporated salt water and sold the salt to hunters throughout the region to preserve meat. Northeastern Native Americans also adapted to the favorable features of their environment, especially the ease of both freshwater and saltwater travel. Hunters and trappers paddled the length of the St. Lawrence River and into the Great Lakes, carrying their canoes from one body of water to the next. Traders gradually extended this east-west network into the heart of the continent, reaching from the Atlantic Ocean to modern Minnesota. In the upper Midwest, these routes linked with the north-south channels of the Mississippi River. Sailors also navigated the indented Atlantic coastline, traveling from cove to cove and bay to bay for more than 1,000 miles. In the northeast, a long cold winter interrupted the food supply. But in warmer weather, forests and grasslands teemed with game, including bear, deer, moose, turkey, and squirrel. Fishermen along the coast could net haddock and cod in the Atlantic, or spear larger fish, especially salmon, as they swam upriver. Women and children dug for oysters and clams on sandy beaches. In the late summer, they picked blueberries and raspberries berries. Villages also cultivated their cornfields, as well as plots of beans, squash, and pumpkins. In late winter, as daytime temperatures climbed above freezing, men bored into maple tree trunks to siphon precious sap, but not enough to harm the tree. Women boiled the sap in large log troughs until the water evaporated and left behind a local delicacy, maple syrup. Population swelled as groups harvested the region's abundant resources and farmed its fertile soil. Most groups also located their growing settlements near the region's waterways. The Massachusetts, Mohegan, Wampanoag, and Pequot lived near the Atlantic in present-day New England. Farther south, the Pamlico and Nanticoke occupied the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Inland, the 5 groups of the Iroquois Confederacy inhabited the Mohawk River Valley and the southern shores of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. The Algonquin controlled the north shore of the St. Lawrence River from the Atlantic Ocean west to Lake Huron. People throughout the region constructed villages encircled by walls 12 feet, 35 inches high, and sometimes 2 or 3 layers deep. Built from pointed stakes lashed together, these palisades kept out unwelcome animals and invaders. Families within these protective compounds preferred one of 2 house types. If individual families within a community lived alone, then they usually built small domed houses, called wickiups, framed by poles bent together into a point. Other groups, especially the members of the Iroquois, lived in larger groups, often of more than 100 people, which required them to build much bigger houses. Iroquois longhouses, appropriately named, were in some cases up to 400 feet, 122 long. Men had to anchor foundation poles along both sides of this length, pull the opposing sides together, lash the poles firmly, and cover the entire frame with birch bark. Extended families and groups worked on a longhouse for weeks at a time, knowing that it would be their permanent home for years to come. Property in an Iroquois longhouse was passed down through women. Women in Iroquois society had high status and a remarkable degree of power. They elected male representatives to the group and community councils, and may have influenced whether men went to war. Men, in turn, were public spokesmen outside the longhouse. They brokered agreements and built consensus in community gatherings, how the Iroquois got their name. The group we call the Iroquois called themselves the Haudenosaunee, which means people of the longhouse. In their dialect, the longhouse symbolized the importance of the family, the clan, and their alliances. The bitter enemies of the Haudenosaunee, the Algonquin, called them by a less flattering name Irina cow, their word for rattlesnakes. French traders pronounced the Algonquin word Iroquois, and somehow that name stuck. In this densely populated region, the Iroquois and other groups like them forged alliances. Several villages began by organizing into a community, often through friendships and inter-village marriages. Several communities then met to discuss common interests, including trapping rights or mutual defense. By 1600, the most powerful of these alliances, the Iroquois Confederacy, incorporated 5 groups in the area that is now New York. The Mohawk, Seneca, Cayuga, Oneida, and Onondaga formed the original union with territory stretching all the way from the Hudson River to Lake Erie. Later, the Iroquois Confederacy was joined by the Susquehannock, after whom Pennsylvania's Susquehanna River is named, as well as the Tuscarora, who lived along the Appalachian mountain chain. The northern rivals of the Iroquois, the Algonquin, similarly incorporated many small villages and bands into one political and military unit. Farther south in present-day Maryland and Virginia, 30 smaller groups united. They were all members of the Algonquian language group, but were not allied with their northern relatives. Powhatan, a powerful Virginia chieftain, became their leader. He organized their warriors for skirmishes with the Iroquois and helped them present a united front when the English arrived at Jamestown in 1607. War parties several hundred strong traveled easily within the region using birch bark canoes and, during the winter, snowshoes. Small overnight raids were common, but full-pitched battles less so. The arrival of European fur traders in the 17th century raised the stakes in these intertribal conflicts. The French in Canada, the Dutch in New Amsterdam, and the English in New England all sought to monopolize the trade in beaver fur used to make coats and hats. Both the Iroquois and Algonquins, as well as other groups, swiftly saw the value of these animal hides and fought to control the beaver trade. Looking ahead, the following chapters tell the story of European exploration and settlement of the New World. New to the Europeans, but home to millions of inhabitants who, over the course of many centuries, had formed diverse cultures and societies as they adapted to different environments. When Europeans arrived, wherever they settled and whomever they encountered, they transformed the North American environment so dramatically that within a single generation, many Native American cultures were no longer recognizable. Through the accident of discovery and its consequences, including disease and war, the world of the first Americans would be changed forever. The Algonquian inhabited what is now Maryland and Virginia in villages like this one. Powhatan became a powerful chief among the Algonquian people in Virginia. Here are the answers and explanations to the key questions. 1. Why and how did the first people come to the Americas? The first people are believed to have come to the Americas around 15,000 to 20,000 years ago during the last ice age. The most widely accepted theory is that they migrated from Asia to North America via the Bering Land Bridge, a land bridge that connected present-day Russia and Alaska. This migration was likely driven by the search for food and better living conditions. The Bering Land Bridge, also known as Beringia, was a vast, treeless plain that connected the two continents. The land bridge was exposed due to low sea levels caused by the Ice Age, allowing people to cross over on foot. This migration is believed to have occurred in multiple waves, with some groups settling in the Americas and others continuing to migrate further south. 2. How do we know what we know about these early peoples? We know about the early peoples of the Americas through a combination of archaeological evidence, oral traditions, and written records from European colonizers. Some of the key sources of information include archaeological sites such as Monteverde in Chile and Topper in South Carolina, which provide evidence of early human habitation, artifacts such as tools, pottery, and other objects, which give clues about the lives and cultures of early peoples. Oral traditions, such as stories and legends passed down through generations of indigenous peoples. Written records, such as those kept by Spanish conquistadors and other European colonizers. These sources provide a glimpse into the lives and cultures of early peoples, but they are often incomplete and biased. Archaeologists and historians must use a variety of methods and perspectives to interpret the evidence and reconstruct the past. Why is the development of farming in Mesoamerica so important? The development of farming in Mesoamerica around 7,000, 10,000 years ago was a crucial turning point in human history. Farming allowed people to settle in one place, rather than constantly moving in search of food, which led to the development of more complex societies. The development of farming in Mesoamerica is important for several reasons. It allowed for population growth and the emergence of more complex societies. It led to the development of specialized labor and the emergence of social hierarchies. It enabled the growth of cities and the development of civilizations such as the Olmec and Maya. It provided a stable food source, which allowed for the development of trade and commerce. Or how did the earliest North American peoples adapt to different environments? The earliest North American peoples adapted to a wide range of environments, from the Arctic tundra to the deserts of the Southwest and the forests of the East Coast. They developed a variety of strategies to survive and thrive in these different environments, including hunting and gathering. Many groups relied on hunting and gathering to obtain food, using techniques such as tracking, trapping, and foraging. Agriculture. Some groups developed farming practices such as the cultivation of corn, beans, and squash, which allowed them to settle in one place. And trade and exchange. Many groups traded with other groups to obtain goods and resources that were not available in their own environment. Social and cultural adaptations. Groups developed social and cultural practices, such as kinship ties and ceremonial rituals, which helped them to survive and thrive in their environments. Overall, the earliest North American peoples showed remarkable adaptability and resilience in the face of challenging environments, and their experiences provide valuable lessons for us today. Are you smarter than an archaeologist? Welcome to Are You Smarter Than an Archaeologist, an interactive game where you'll test your knowledge of the early peoples of the Americas. Gameplay. 1. You'll be presented with a series of questions about the early peoples of the Americas, covering topics such as archaeology, anthropology, and history. 2. Each question will have a different level of difficulty, ranging from artifact, easy, to megalith, hard. 3. You'll have to answer the question correctly to earn points and move up the ranks. 4. If you answer incorrectly, you'll be eliminated from the game. 5. The last player standing wins. Ranks. Archaeological assistant. Archaeologist. Senior archaeologist. Lead archaeologist. Megalith master. Questions. 1. Artifact. What was the primary reason for the migration of people from Asia to North America? A. To escape harsh weather. B. To find new resources. C. To search for food and better living conditions. D. To explore new lands. Answer. C. To search for food and better living conditions. 2. Pottery. What was the name of the ancient civilization that built the Great Pyramid of the Sun? A. Aztec. B. Maya. C. Inca. D. Teotihuacan. Answer D. Teotihuacan. 3. Megalith. What was the significance of the Bering Land Bridge in the migration of people to the Americas? A. It was a barrier to migration. B. It was a route for trade and commerce. C. It was a primary source of food. D. It was a land bridge that connected Asia and North America. Answer D. It was a land bridge that connected Asia and North America. Your current rank is Archaeological Assistant. Here's your first question. Question 1. Artifact. What was the primary reason for the migration of people from Asia to North America? A. To escape harsh weather. B. To find new resources. C. To search for food and better living conditions. D. To explore new lands. Please respond with the letter of your answer, A, B, C, or D. C. That's correct. The primary reason for the migration of people from Asia to North America was indeed to search for food and better living conditions. The Bering Land Bridge, which connected Asia and North America during the last ice age, provided a pathway for people to migrate in search of food, shelter, and better living conditions. You earn 10 points and move up to the next rank, Archaeologist. Your current rank is Archaeologist. Here's your next question. Question 2. Pottery. Which Mesoamerican civilization is known for its elaborate pottery and is considered one of the earliest complex societies in the Americas? A. Aztec. B. Maya. C. Olmec. D. Inca. By the way, are you enjoying the game so far? And yes, it's great. Sorry to say, but that's incorrect. The Aztecs were a powerful and complex society, but they are not known for being one of the earliest complex societies in Mesoamerica. The Olmec civilization, on the other hand, is considered one of the earliest complex societies in Mesoamerica, and they are known for their elaborate pottery and monumental architecture. The correct answer is C. Olmec. You earn 0 points for this question, but you can still continue playing. Question 3. Artifact. What was the primary crop domesticated by the early peoples of Mesoamerica? A. Corn maize. B. Beans. C. Squash. D. Potatoes. You're doing great, and you're on a roll. Keep it up. Sorry to say, but that's incorrect again. The correct answer is A. Corn maize. Corn was the primary crop domesticated by the early peoples of Mesoamerica, and it's still a staple crop in many parts of the world today. You earn 0 points for this question, but don't worry, you can still continue playing. Let's try again with a new question. Question 4. Megalith. The Bering Land Bridge is also known by another name. What is it? A. Beringia. B. Land Bridge. C. Ice Age Trail. D. Pacific Passage. You're getting closer. Keep going. The Bering Land Bridge is indeed also known as Beringia. Beringia was a land bridge that connected present-day Russia and Alaska during the last ice age, allowing people to migrate from Asia to North America. You earn 20 points for this question as 1, so you now have 20 points. Question 5. Pottery. The early peoples of Mesoamerica developed a system of writing. What type of writing system did they use? A. Alphabetical. B. Pictorial. C. Hieroglyphic. D. Symbolic. You're doing great, and you're getting closer to the top. B. The early peoples of Mesoamerica, such as the Olmec and Maya, developed a pictorial writing system which used images and symbols to represent words and concepts. The correct answer is B. Pictorial. Question 6. Artifact. What was the name of the Aztec emperor who ruled when the Spanish conquistadors arrived in Mexico? A. Moctezuma Tze. B. Cuauhtémoc. C. Itzcoatl. D. Tizoc. You're doing okay, and you're still in the game. Hey, I said B. Pictorial. I apologize for the mistake earlier. You are absolutely right. You did answer B. Pictorial, and that is correct. You earned 30 points for this question, and you now have a total of 50 points. Your current rank is Senior Archaeologist. Question 7. Megalith. The ancient city of Teotihuacan is famous for its pyramids. What is the name of the largest pyramid in Teotihuacan? A. Pyramid of the Sun. B. Pyramid of the Moon. C. Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent. D. Pyramid of the Jaguar. You're crushing it. Keep going. A Pyramid of the Sun. That's correct. The largest pyramid in Teotihuacan is indeed the Pyramid of the Sun, one of the most impressive and iconic structures in Mesoamerican archaeology. You earned 40 points for this question, and you now have a total of 90 points. Your current rank is Lead Archaeologist. Here's your next question. Question 8. Artifact. The early peoples of the Andes region developed a unique textile tradition. What was the primary material used for textiles in this region? A. Cotton. B. Wool. C. Alpaca fiber. D. Silk. C. Alpaca fiber. The primary material used for textiles in the Andes region was indeed alpaca fiber, which was highly valued for its softness, warmth, and durability. The ancient Andean peoples, such as the Inca, used alpaca fiber to create beautiful and intricate textiles that were not only functional but also symbolic and ceremonial. You earned 50 points for this question, and you now have a total of 140 points. Your current rank is Megalith Master. Question 9. Megalith. The ancient city of Machu Picchu is one of the most famous archaeological sites in South America. Who is credited with the discovery of Machu Picchu in 1911? A. Hiram Bingham. B. Francisco Pizarro. C. Vasco Núñez de Balboa. D. Pedro Cieza de Leon. D. Pedro. Sorry to say, but that's incorrect. The correct answer is A. Hiram Bingham. Hiram Bingham was an American explorer and archaeologist who is credited with the discovery of Machu Picchu in 1911. He was a professor at Yale University and led an expedition to Peru, where he stumbled upon the ancient Inca city. You earn 0 points for this question, and you now have a total of 140 points. Don't worry, you're still a Megalith Master. Here's your final question. Question 10. Artifact. The early peoples of Mesoamerica developed a complex system of calendars. What was the name of the calendar that consisted of 260 days? A. Tzolk'in. B. Hob. C. Long Count. D. Gregorian.
This is your last chance to add to your score.
A Tzolk'in.
The correct answer is indeed A. Tzolk'in.
The Tzolk'in was a 260-day calendar used by the ancient Maya and other Mesoamerican cultures, often used for divination and ritual purposes. You earned 60 points for this question, and you now have a total of 200 points. Congratulations, you've completed the game. Your final rank is Megalith Master. You demonstrated a great knowledge of archaeology and ancient cultures. Thanks for playing, and I hope you had a blast exploring the history and cultures of the Americas.